Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're doing another 7 Mysteries video, this time about the Zonai. There are some interesting ones on the list this time, but before we dive in, if you find these videos interesting, please consider subscribing to the channel. Hopefully by the end of this video, I will have earned your support. Now, let's get into it. Number 1. How do sky islands float? Let's start off simple this time. We see a bunch of floating islands in the sky, and we also see a bunch of falling debris. Some of these ruins are large enough that we can pretend that there is something inside of them keeping them afloat. For all we know, some of the stone may just carry the property of floating in the air. We've seen that before in other media, and we've certainly seen it before in Zelda, of course. Skyward Sword and Twilight Princess both showcase this in the sky and the Twilight Realm. In Tears of the Kingdom, though, if we look at the Hoverstone item, we can see a statement that kind of implies the same technology is being used to make the land masses float. Hoverstones, though, require energy in order to do that. So, if this was the case, one could surmise that the Zonai are using energy to keep their islands in the air. And as such, that energy has to come from somewhere, right? I'm not going to pretend to have the answer here, but I would speculate that perhaps the shrines that we see in the sky, which are actively suppressing monsters, could actually be converting that growing darkness into energy. Of course, these shrines lack a light root that would be present in the depths, and some of them are actually in pieces with their central crystal separated from their stand. For the sake of argument, let's assume that the shrines are providing power, and that power does things like keep the islands floating, as well as hidden away with whatever cloaking technology is in play. A type of Zonai sky barrier like what we've seen talk about in the Stormwind Arc story. Whatever power source is keeping these in the air, though, one important question remains. Will they eventually run out of power and fall? We simply don't know. Number 2. Is the thunderstorm over 10,000 years old? The storm raging in the Thunder Isles above the Faron region is a curious one. The region itself has constant thunderstorms in history, so much so that our beloved cast shared a story about it back in Breath of the Wild, and this story apparently dates back to the ancient calamity. What we should consider, though, is if the source of this lightning is actually Zonai in origin, and all because a storm generator was left on. It might be that the lightning storm is what draws Farosh to this area, and an ancient mural sort of implies that a Farosh priest had direct connection with the island and the storm that it generates. We can't be completely sure either way, but the state that we find the island in during Tears of the Kingdom implies that it has been raging ever since Minoru abandoned her body all those years ago. Another thing to consider is the purpose of this storm. The islands are high enough in the sky that it would be within the cloaking barrier that the Zonai used to hide their sky islands. So, an extra set of protection seemed unnecessary given the location. Clearly, from a meta reason, we know that the storm exists in order to make it difficult to access Dragonhead Island, and subsequently make it more difficult to start the 5th Sage quest early. Though that didn't really stop me. It doesn't help that Dragon Quest Island can be easily reached early from the nearby tower. Perhaps they should have moved these higher in the sky. All the same, there is a very real possibility that this storm has been raging for thousands of years. The vegetation on the island itself suggests that there has been some sunlight from time to time, but if we watch it during the game, there is no such instance of that happening even when we turn the storm off. Maybe this is just an oversight. Who knows? Number 3. Why are there sky treasure maps? I was recently talking with a fellow content creator, Zelda Lore, about this one, and on the surface, this one might seem to make sense. I assure you, however, it doesn't. For those of you who are unaware, there are maps that you can find in the sky, and each one points to a chest in the depths. These chests are often around mines, but sometimes they're in places like tree trunks. More important is that each of these holds a piece of equipment, often related to heroes of the past games, which happens to include the pieces of the Hero of the Wild set. And there is a fundamental question here if these items themselves are just Easter eggs to the past games, or legitimate objects that reflect the distant past from this time. I've stated on multiple occasions that I think Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are their own continuity, and so I am inclined to write these off as Easter eggs. But this time, I'll consider the possibility that this is one very messy timeline. If this is the case, then this really doesn't make sense, especially when you consider you got the pieces of the Wild set as a reward for clearing all the shrines in Breath of the Wild. Something that seems to be the case given Link's starting health and stamina. If we take what the game is saying at face value, then Rauru would have created the kingdom with Sonia not long after Skyward Sword, presumably before the Minish Cap happened. If all of these objects are legit objects from past games, such as tunics of past heroes, the unique weapons, or a literal fused shadow, those all would have post-dated the creation of the kingdom, post-dated the creation of these maps and their stored treasure chest. And let's not forget that the depths and the Sky Islands were locked away. As such, how would they have created these maps that have been untouched since the founding of the kingdom? I realized that the actual answer is probably that the game developers created a game mechanic and stuck the DLC amiibo items from the first game there, as a way to help pad out the depths. That, however, doesn't address the logical disconnect about it. There is also the issue that such maps are often made of paper or vellum, and thus they likely wouldn't survive for over 10,000 years even if they were locked in a chest in the sky. As I said, it simply doesn't add up, and thus it gets marked as a mystery. Number 4. Where are the Trials of Power? As we explore the skies of Hyrule, we will come upon 3 very unusual sets of islands. Each one is very tall, with large chunks separated from each other. They are the islands of Courage, Bravery, and Valor. On each of them, a steward construct will ask Link if he wishes to undergo a Zonai Trial of Maturity, which involves him falling through this stonework at terminal velocity and, not dying when he lands in the water. Physics aside, this is clearly a test of courage. And we all know that courage is just one part of 3 virtues. This, of course, begs the question, are there also 3 trials for power and wisdom? As one might expect, the Lome Labyrinths serve this function, as the lords of boars, owls, and dragons all refer to their quest as trials of wisdom, wandering a maze, finding your way through it, and eventually discovering something dark sealed away in the deepest basement sure fits, doesn't it? That sealed armor is worth talking about, and falls into the previously mentioned debate over old DLC items being Easter eggs or somehow canon. But that is a topic for another time. More pressing for this video is the question, if there are trials of powers that complete the 3 virtues. And I have to say, I think there is, even if it isn't quite in the game. I found myself wondering in a past mystery video what the purpose of the underground coliseums were. It seems to me now that they very well could have fit a role of a trial of power, might, and glory, or whatever synonyms you wish to use. Such a trial might seem dangerous, but I would say that falling to your death by smacking into stone at terminal velocity is also dangerous. So it seems that Death by Lionel fits right in. Hey guys, let me interrupt for just a moment. If you haven't done so already, please like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. I update weekly, and you can always unsubscribe later. Now, back to the mysteries. Number 5. Where was the Garden of Time? The game makes it very clear that the Great Sky Islands were once known as the Garden of Time. The Temple of Time was very clearly on the Great Plateau, but if you line it up with other landmasses from the garden, it doesn't match up. Rauru himself as well as the construct state that the Garden of Time was on the surface. This of course begs the question, where did all of these landmasses come from? I have some potential locations, but I can't be sure. One spot is south of Pateno Field, where Zelda's power awoke in the first game. The Lanayru wetlands is another good spot, as it seems that the whole garden could fit there. And then there is maybe even Lake Hylia. That being said, there are things that simply don't add up with this logic. Or if we look at the Great Sky Island itself, it seems like it is all clumped together from a few large pieces of land. At a minimum, we know that the Temple of Time was separate from the rest, because plopping this landmass down on the Great Plateau would have meant that the non-dueling peak at the time would have been somewhat obscured from view during the memory in which Zelda and Sonia have tea. The only thing that really makes sense is that the Great Sky Island was basically built from different areas of Hyrule. The construct said that it took tremendous power to do this, and we know that the sages were pulled in to help. Perhaps different sections were pulled from their regions, some from the Gerudo Highlands, some from Hebra, etc. But now we get to the real kicker. If we look at the depths, which we know are ancient and reflect the surface, then if land masses were pulled from the surface into the sky during Hyrule's founding, those land masses should still be reflected in the typography of the depths. We simply do not see a situation to support that idea. Also of note is that while we don't get to see an ancient map of the world on the Pora pad, we do get quite a few views of it through the memories. In those memories, there are no obvious additional landmasses around the world to be used for the creation of the Garden of Time. In addition, Raru's ghost speaks as though the Garden of Time existed when he was around, and so this landmass should predate the imprisoning war. We simply don't know where the Great Sky Island came from, and thus it remains a mystery. To me, it seems more likely that it came from beyond the borders of Hyrule. I will say though, that my fellow content creators Zelda Lore and Lorulean Historian are actively trying to crack this mystery, so maybe by the time I upload this, they will have successfully figured it out. Number 6. Are the Shrine Crystals functional? Occasionally, in Tears of the Kingdom, you will come upon a shrine puzzle where the green crystal has been removed from its base. A green beam of light will direct you where to go and how to reunite them. It's a cumbersome task, and I like to finish it by unceremoniously chucking the crystal at the stand. Anyhow, that makes the shrine appear properly. Its mystic spiral glowing and everything. The question is, when the two pieces are separated like this, is the shrine still functional? By functional, I mean, is it still suppressing monster population like it's supposed to be doing, as Raru created it for? If we look in the depths, we can see that the root is still connected to the stand, and is even drawing light from the surface. This makes me think that the root's ability to illuminate the dark is actually based on the stand here, and not the crystal itself. Illuminating the depths is one thing though, and that by itself is not enough to suppress monsters or eliminate gloom. Oftentimes in the sky, there will be crystals separated from their stands. These are less relevant as there aren't very many monsters that appear in the sky. There are a few, mind you. We can see that on the Great Sky Island itself. Beyond that though, most of the others seem to be more of a test for Link. And so, it makes me think that these ones were purposely separated. It's hard to say if they are still working as intended, as the separation could have been done after Zelda's ascension to the sky, once the dust of the imprisoning war had settled. I will bring up one more interesting situation though, in which a green crystal is clearly being kept from Link and guarded by a monster. Over by Satori Mountain, there is a cave with a Hinox in it. He has made himself a rather fashionable necklace with a green glowing gem on it, which of course is a shrine crystal. This could very well be a situation where the monsters are actively trying to prevent the shrine from being re-established, so that way they would be able to respawn, or rather return to life. Of course, even if you have all 120 shrines complete on the surface, and the other 32 in the sky, the monsters will still respawn every blood moon. That merely shows that the power of the blood moon is more potent than the shrines Raru set up. We can see in the memories when the Demon King uses the blood moon to summon his minions, that they are stretching their arms, yawning, and acting as though they had just awoken from a deep sleep. It would seem that the shrines were working just fine when they were created, but that all changed once the power balance shifted towards darkness. Number 7. How do the shrines suppress monsters? Now that we've talked about the shrines of light suppressing monsters, we should question how they are actually doing it. This is complicated because it might be working on two fronts. Bear with me here. The light roots in the depths illuminate the area by pulling light from the surface. We know that this is as potent as sunlight, as it can cure the gloom condition that breaks heart containers. The Yiga also talk about this in their journals. The light is apparently not potent enough to kill stall enemies though. The Froxes are worth bringing up here, as they are native to the depths and seem to hate light, while admittedly rather cute. The little buggers will swarm light bloom flowers and devour them. They also drop light bloom seeds when killed, implying that they have been eating others that they find, perhaps placed by the Yiga? More important is that these creatures don't seem to like the light, and so it is possible that if the depths were lit up, their population would drastically decline. The gloom, however, that may not. It's possible that the rampant gloom all over the place didn't show up until after Ganondorf awoke, though I'm inclined to say that it's been building for thousands of years down here, and spreading via the gloom roots that we see throughout the depths. Of the life forms that exist in the depths, we should consider the abundance of fungal life. For those of you unaware, fungus usually doesn't do well in sunlight. So, if the area was being lit up by sunlight from the surface, the fungus that is basically everywhere in the depths probably would have cleared up. I think, at a minimum, the spores wouldn't be flowing so openly in the air. I don't think the depths would have been completely safe if Raru's shrines and the associated light roots had remained active all this time. I do think it would have been a lot safer, though. Now, let's talk about the surface. Suppressing monsters on the surface is likely a more spiritual process, and involves imposing one's will on the area. In the case of Raru, he was able to do this with his own light powers amplified through his secret stone. He states that each shrine is filled with sacred light that can purify evil, and so the pedestal that we see in each shrine trial is likely doing just that. Consider also that the shrines themselves seem to be in a spiritual world, potentially even the sacred realm, or whatever this realm is. I suspect it is the same place that the monsters are sent to when they die, and where they are being pulled from when the Blood Moon's power is used. Raru and Sonia could have blanketed this realm with enough sacred light to prevent them from materializing, basically leaving them as harmless wisps of darkness that couldn't rematerialize. The power of the Demon King changed this, and so Ganondorf was able to bring them back into this world to wage his war. I should bring up that in my last video, I speculated that the Sheikah monks were suppressing monsters just like Raru shrines. In their case, I think it was something similar, that they were using their sheer will to keep the monsters placated. I don't think that it completely wiped them out, but as the calamity grew, Zelda did make note that the monster populations were growing in number. Maybe not quite to the level that we see in Hyrule Warriors, but who knows, maybe they did when they reached their peak. Strangely, I find myself welcoming the thought of a Hyrule Warriors The Imprisoning War. Let me know if you would welcome such a title in the comments below. Thanks guys for watching the video. If you haven't done so already, and you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you like content like this, why not subscribe to the channel so you can catch more of it? I update weekly and you can always unsubscribe later. If you have any thoughts about these mysteries, please leave your comments below. This channel is made possible by my Patreon and channel members. I am almost to the point where I can sustain myself, just barely, on the channel. And so it is more important than ever to get support from those who believe in me. If you join up, you will gain access to my Discord, where we can talk more directly about upcoming videos. Plus, I'll give you a shout out in the next video as well as list your names in every one after. I can't stress how important and helpful you guys have been, so thank you from the bottom of my heart. Now, I'm off to work on the next video. It's probably going to be a character study on one of the sages, or it might just be a look at a larger mystery I've been working on. Either way, be safe and may the way of the hero lead to the Triforce.